master plan update. This is our public open house meeting number 2. So I am Leah Whitfield. I am the project manager from the Aviation Planning Group. And with me today, we have a few members of the port staff. We have the Operations and Airport Director, Rudy Rudolph. We have the Executive Services Director, Lisa Park. And we have, I apologize, Jenny, the Senior Marketing and Communication, Senior Manager of Communications, Marketing and Government Affairs. And then I also have Renee Dowlin, our environmental planner on the project from the Aviation Planning Group, and Darren Murata from our subconsultant firm Dowell, who serves as the project's lead airport engineer. Just a few housekeeping things to start. This presentation is being recorded and it will later be posted on the Port's Airport Master Plan update website. So you can view it after this presentation. We're going to go ahead and mute all participants during the presentation. If you do have a comment, please feel free to type that in the chat box. And either it can be addressed by a member of the Port or the project team, or we'll address that at the end, but comments will be heard at the end during the comments portion of the presentation. So we'll jump right in and we'll start with just an overview of what we're going to discuss today. Hopefully several of you were able to attend our first public open house, so or at least view the presentation afterwards, so you're familiar with what the Airport Master Plan update is accomplishing. So we'll start with just what an Airport Master Plan update kind of process is, and then the focus areas and the goals of the project. And then we'll touch for a bit on the schedule and overall progress of the study. Then we're going to talk about the facility requirements and the needs of the airport. And then we'll go into our development alternatives, which is really the focus of the meeting today, which is what future development will best meet the airport's facility requirements today and for the next 20 years. And then we'll talk a little bit about alternative aviation fuels and what the future of that might look like, and our next steps, and then comments at the very end. So what is an Airport Master Plan update and why are we doing this study? So this study is funded by the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. And the FAA requires that an airport conduct an Airport Master Plan every 5 to 10 years. And this is an Airport Master Plan update, just to acknowledge the changes that have happened and do a new forecast and a new plan based off of the old Airport Master Plan. So we're not really reinventing the wheel, we're doing an update to the last Airport Master Plan. But it's a comprehensive study of an airport that usually describes the short, the medium, and the long-term development plans to meet future aviation demand. So it's about a 20-year horizon that we look at. And we follow a very specific FAA process. It's called the Advisory Circular 150-5070-6B, and that kind of details the process of the Airport Master Plan. And so you'll see those key tasks there: our inventory, our forecast, facility requirements, alternatives, which is where we are right now, the airport layout plan, and a capital improvement plan. The purpose of the Airport Master Plan is really not to solve any of the airport's management, operations, or maintenance issues. It's really focused on that development to meet that aviation demand. So we wanted to start just by looking at the overall airport property map. So this is from the last Airport Master Plan, and this is the current airport layout plan property map that's been approved by the FAA. So you see all of these different shaded parcels, and that really showcases all of the property that the port owns on behalf of the airport. So our study is really focused on this area outlined in red. So this is the aeronautical area, and that's where the master plan is focusing. So we're not focusing on the area that's really on the non-aeronautical side of the airport, but the aeronautical side of the airport. So that kind of helps you narrow the focus and understand where our development alternatives will look. So as I mentioned, the airport had a master plan several years ago, and they have an approved airport layout plan from the FAA. And it's a very complicated map, so we don't expect you to understand or glean a lot of this, but we wanted to just kind of showcase that this was the existing airport layout plan that's currently approved. And so we're kind of starting from this and then looking at what might need to change or be altered, or what is good and we should keep. So the master plan's goals are really to meet that aviation demand, like I said, in that 5, 10, 15, and 20-year horizon through that aviation forecast. To meet the FAA design standards, the FAA has very specific design standards based on the type of aircraft that fly in and out of the airport. A lot of that has to do with spacing between like a runway and a taxiway. We want to make sure aircraft stay safe. And so we want to make sure that the port is meeting those FAA design standards at the airport. We want to make sure that Olympia is prepared for any future development. So if someone comes to the port and wants to build a hangar, where would they put that hangar? We want to make sure we properly plan that. And then we also want to make sure that Olympia is prepared for emerging aviation technologies. If you follow aviation news at all, or even local news, you've seen a lot of emerging aviation technologies, especially with alternative fuels, like sustainable aviation fuels, electric aircraft, hydrogen-powered aircraft. So we want to make sure that Olympia can take advantage of those opportunities. And then we also want to make sure that the airport continues to be self-sufficient. That's a requirement for grant assurances that the airport is self-sufficient. And so we want to make sure that anything we do at the airport continues that self-sufficiency. So this is the overall project study. Won't spend a lot of time here, but just wanted to kind of give you the overview. We started the project in March. We expect to finish the study in July. We're currently at that February. We're kind of in the solutions phase right now. So what have we done so far? So far we've completed the inventory chapter. We have a draft inventory chapter. We also have an approved forecast chapter by the FAA. The FAA requires 2 key points that they really get involved in the airport master plan process. And one of those is approving formally that aviation forecast for both based aircraft and operations. And then we've also have a draft facility requirements chapter that looks at, based on that forecast, what does the airport need? And based on those airport design standards from the FAA, where are we deficient and where, because the standards change over time. The FAA is constantly evolving their standards for safety purposes. And so where do we need to correct things such as a taxiway intersection? So our current focus area right now as a part of the study is coordination with the Habitat Conservation Plan team. As many of you are aware, that is a separate study that's not being conducted by our team, but we're just simply coordinating with that Habitat Conservation Plan. We're in the alternative stage, so that's what we'll talk about today. And so the alternatives really looks at where would development go and what type of development should go on what parcel at the airport. And again, those taxiway layouts, runway layouts, things like that. And then we're starting the airport layout plan, which is again, that other formal document that the FAA has to sign and approve. And approval of the airport layout plan is really important because anything that happens at the airport has to be on that airport layout plan in order for the FAA to fund the project or allow the project to proceed. So future areas, we're not quite there yet, but in the future, we'll be focusing on the implementation of the project. So how do we phase the projects? What's the top priority over the next 5, 10, 15 years? And then also looking at a Part 139 commercial service feasibility study that will also come at a later time in this master plan study. So facility requirements. So this is kind of in a nutshell what we need to meet as a part of the development alternatives. So we need to meet based and transient aircraft demand. So we want to make sure that we have space set aside for those aircraft hangars, for those aircraft to park on the apron. We need to meet that demand. We also need to correct taxiway designs to meet those FAA design standards that I mentioned. So that has to do with the angles, some of the spacing, where the taxiway intersects with the runway. So really focused on safety standards there. And then we also want to ensure we can maintain a crosswind runway for smaller aircraft. We want to evaluate a potential future location for a terminal building, and then also an airport maintenance building to store equipment as well. And then fuel storage expansion. The fuel is operated by the fixed space operator, not by the port, but we want to make sure we at least plan a space for that to continue to grow as needed. And then integration of emerging trends, whether that's electric aircraft or sustainable aviation fuel or solar at the aircraft, other sustainable opportunities, whatever those emerging trends are, we want to make sure that we can accommodate those in our developments as well. So the alternatives are really going to focus on the runways, taxiways, the development areas, and then alternative fuels. So it's kind of a little mini agenda for this section of the presentation. And when we look at the different development areas, I wanted to just kind of highlight the different types of development areas that you'll see on the maps today. And these follow and align with what the last airport layout plan has. The first being airport related industrial. So this is a City of Tumwater zoning that supports aviation and industrial related uses, and it discourages incompatible uses and heights near the airport. Our general aviation small, so you'll see a picture of T hangars there to the right. So it's the smaller fixed wing aircraft. And then general aviation corporate, which is more box hangars, so larger hangars than those smaller aircraft would need. Sometimes that might have 3 or 4 smaller aircraft in it, not necessarily a larger aircraft. And then commercial air service, which is just a placeholder for any potential future terminal building and associated parking and facilities. Again, similar to what the last airport layout plan had. And then commercial, which is really that prime road frontage for any commercial businesses that could support the airport. So I'll go ahead and turn this over to Darren Murata to go over the different alternatives. Darren, you might be on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to be going through 3 alternatives today, and what you're looking at is alternative 1. And let me first explain a little bit on what you're looking at. So this is just an aerial showing the airport area, and in this dark blue color, what that represents, those are existing taxiways that are proposed to remain in place. Where you see the red color, that is new proposed taxiway pavement. And then where you see the cross-hatched areas over to the left, yep, those are pavement areas that are proposed to be removed. So I'm going to be talking about potential or possible changes to the runways and the taxiway system. So this is alternative 1, and if you go to the next slide. So Leah mentioned that we're looking at areas where we need to correct taxiways to meet design standards for safety. So this is one example where we would actually realign some of these taxiway connector intersections to meet current design standards. The next item shows a realignment of Taxiway F. So Taxiway F, you can see, is located further from the runway right now, when we would propose to move it closer to the runway to meet minimum standards for separation. And then the last item there is removal of Taxiway C and D, which is shown there. So just removing some pavement because it's not needed, and just provides a better layout for aircraft circulation. So that's alternative 1. Oh, sorry, and one other item, just potential fuel farm expansion there over at the north end. Next slide. So you can see alternative 2, you can really see what the differences are in red. So this option has more new taxiway pavement proposed, and also some removal of existing pavements. So you can hit the next slide. There you go. So these things are all similar between alternative 1 and 2. So again, we see some realignment of intersections to meet safety standards. Also see realignment of taxiway F, and then removal of taxiway C and D. Now, next I'm going to talk about what's actually different between this alternative. So first there you see the realignment of taxiway G in red. And then the other big change in this alternative, so the crosswind runway, runway 826, this alternative actually proposes shortening that runway by almost 1,400 feet. So you can see that cross-hatched area. This runway would actually be shortened, and we would potentially remove that excess pavement. also proposed with this alternative is a realignment of taxiway W there. So that's the existing, and then that's the proposed. So this is alternative 3. And so this has a lot of the same features as the other options, the other alternatives. So all these items are common. You can keep it there. So realignment of the angled intersections, realignment of taxiway G, realignment of taxiway F, realignment of taxiway W, and then removal of taxiways C and D. Now, the things that are different with this alternative, go ahead and advance, there you go. So this one would actually include the realignment of taxiway E as a full-length parallel taxiway. And this alternative includes maintaining that full length of runway 826 as it currently is today. So you can see with the red, there's new pavement proposed, but there's also a lot of pavement proposed to be removed, as you can see in all those crosshatched areas. And again, a lot of these improvements are proposed to meet FAA's design standards to bring things in compliance with current standards. So the next slide shows a summary. So this is just a summary of the changes to the taxiway and runway pavement as compared with the existing airport layout plan that the airport currently has. So in each alternative, as you can see here, there's actually less taxiway and runway pavement than what you have shown in your existing airport layout plan. So development alternative 1 has 885,000 less square feet of taxiway and runway pavement. Development alternative 2 has over 900,000 square feet less taxiway and runway pavement, and development alternative 3 has about 490,000 square feet less taxiway or runway pavement than the existing ALP. So that, again, that's a summary of the taxiway runway pavement changes. Next, I'm going to be talking about the actual development areas. So outside of the taxiway areas, you see some shaded areas that list commercial air service, GA small, and then in gray, you see the aviation related industrial. So these correspond to the different types of development, potential development that Leah was mentioning earlier. So for each of these alternatives, we show potential development areas and then the approximate acreage of each type. So this is alternative 1. And next we can go to alternative 2. And you can see how as the taxiway system changes, the potential development areas also change. But in general, you see a mix of aviation related industrial in gray, and then the general aviation corporate and small areas in the more kind of pinkish color. And then move into alternative 3. And again, you see a change in the potential development areas depending on what the runway and taxiway system looks like. Now, the next slide shows just a comparison of developable areas sorted by type. In the left column there shows what the existing airport layout plan includes. So just over 400 acres and potential development area. And then to the right, this shows a summary of what each development alternative includes for development areas.
And I think it's good to just reiterate that these are just development areas. So we're just saying if someone were to develop a corporate hangar this is the location that is the best use for that size of aircraft and that size of hangar. And this is, if someone wants to develop a general aviation smaller T hangar, then this is the best location for that to be. So it's not saying that there's going to be 400 acres of development immediately. This is just simply looking at the land and looking at the best use of that particular parcel of land.
And I think I'm going to turn it back to Leah after this, who's going to talk about electric aircraft.
Thanks, Darren. So we wanted to just touch base a little bit on alternative aviation fuel. So I'm going to talk a little bit about electric aircraft and then also on hydrogen. We touched a little bit on just sustainable aviation fuel, otherwise known as SAF, previously, and that's just a different mixture and blend of fuel that can go in to kind of the traditional aircraft. But electric aircraft, you've likely seen a lot of news about this, especially around Washington State there in the Pacific Northwest. So these are just a couple of news articles and just showing how far electric aircraft are coming. The technology really is advancing very quickly. You'll see in December 2019, you might have heard that Magna X and Harbor Air, they ran the first electric Beaver aircraft, or eBeaver. So that's a small passenger commuter aircraft. So they were able to fly that up in Vancouver. And then just recently in the news, you likely saw that the Aviation Alice is ready to be testing there in Washington State as well. So that was just a recent news article. So it really is transforming very quickly. You also see a picture there at the bottom left that has a United emblem on it. United has agreed to purchase some Heart Aerospace, which is a European company, some aircraft from them in the coming years. So electric aircraft technology is really projected to help the aviation industry reach our reduced emission goals being set by the current administration. And they are projected to have a lower overall operating cost. They're also just better for the environment, less noise, things like that. And that prototype electric aircraft have been completing their flights, as we just saw you, in the last few years, and they continue to do so. But certifications for passenger aircraft up to 20 passengers and for air taxi operators and regional flights could be completed as early as the end of the year. So a lot's going to change. A lot has changed in the past 6 months, since even since September when we last met with you, and it continues to evolve and change. But the FAA really has to be ready to be able to certify these aircraft. Electric aircraft are projected to make up to 5% of the fleet in the US within a decade. So 5% of all the aircraft flying in the United States could be electric in the next 10 years. So how do we power those electric aircraft? They obviously require megawatts of electrical power, and airports have to be involved in the generation, distribution, and supply of electric power, just as they have to have a fuel farm in order to provide that 100 low lead aircraft fuel. So there are opportunities that the existing electrical grid may need to be upgraded, and we're kind of doing this as part of the facility requirements, but looking at this as an appendix to the airport master plan. So we're working with a local utility provider for that, to examine the existing infrastructure around the airport. And of course, renewable energy can also be utilized to power these aircraft and to recharge the batteries themselves through solar installations, things like wind turbines, other sustainable energies. So there's a couple examples at the bottom of the screen there. The one on the left is an actual electric aircraft charger being developed by a company called Electro Aero. Another is an electric charger being powered by that solar panel. And then on the bottom right is actually a hangar. That picture is actually taken from Australia. And that's actually a smart solar hangar. So there's solar panels on top of the roof that's helping re-energize the batteries and the charging stations to charge those electric aircraft. So the development of these types of things can be key in order for Olympia to take advantage of these new technologies. So there really is an opportunity for Olympia. Some of you may have heard of Washington DOT, so WashDOT's electric aircraft feasibility study, and that Olympia was chosen as a beta test site for that. They have a pretty vested interest in the airport being located there on the west side of the airport. Electric aircraft are significantly quieter and have shorter takeoffs. I encourage you to go on YouTube or just Google some electric aircraft and just listen, that it's very incredible how quiet that they are. And they also have landing capabilities allowing that shorter runway length. So longer runways are not necessary. And there really is upgraded capacity is going to be explored on the west side of the airport. In the development alternatives, we've not quite identified a location for electric aircraft, but we have come to realize that we need to make sure it's somehow consolidated so that way any electrical grid infrastructure upgrades can be done in one area versus all over the airport. So hydrogen aircraft. So this is also kind of more in the news even in the last few months. So you see a couple of news articles here, some of those smaller commercial scale hydrogen planes that have been taking off in the UK and in Europe. There's hope that a hydrogen powered plane could fly halfway around the world without refueling as well. And so there's, again, a lot of research and development going into hydrogen aircraft. So what does that mean? Hydrogen contains 3 times more energy per weight than jet fuel. So it's a lot lighter than a battery would be. Batteries are very heavy in those aircraft. So we're only going to see those smaller aircraft being electrified. And it's the most energetic non-nuclear fuel. And aviation, of course, is the most weight sensitive application because we've got to have less weight to get up in the air. Hydrogen is a true zero carbon fuel, which is great. And we think by 2025 that the costs are really going to start decreasing for hydrogen. And eventually hydrogen is going to be more affordable than like a Jet A or 100 low lead fuel that the typical aircraft takes today. And it's just worth noting that hydrogen is significantly safer than the jet fuel we use today in aircraft. And there's a lot of airports around the country that are already using, and cities and communities using hydrogen powered vehicles. So that's just a little bit on the emerging technologies that the study is looking at, and we'll continue to look at those over the coming months. So again, where do we go from here? We have our development alternatives, and then we're in that solution stage. So the next step in the solution stage is to do an alternative evaluation. So we were working with the port over the coming and the FAA over the coming weeks to do that evaluation. We'll do an environmental review, which is a high level review. Any project that comes out of the master plan before development would still have to go through that NEPA environmental process in the future, but that doesn't happen here in the master plan. And then we're going to come up with our recommended alternatives. So we'll come up with one development plan. That doesn't mean it's going to be alternative 1, 2, or 3. It will likely be kind of a combination and the best elements out of each one. So we'll work on our preferred alternative, and then we'll present that information to the public again at a future public open house. And then we'll get into the implementation stage over the summer months, really looking at what do projects cost and how do we phase those projects and how do we fund those projects. There's a lot of money coming out of the recent infrastructure bill, especially concerning sustainable opportunities. So we'll look at different funding sources outside of the FAA, and then we'll put everything in that airport layout plan set. It's a set of drawings that the FAA will have to approve and sign. And then we'll have our draft and report for the public to comment on, and then our final report as well. So we're going to get into comments, but I wanted to go over just a few things that that we've been hearing that might answer a few questions or concerns. So I mentioned the habitat conservation plan previously. So that is a separate study outside of the airport master plan. The master plan is really looking at an unconstrained study that's looking at aviation only. And so the master plan is identifying that potential development. The habitat conservation plan is looking at the endangered species and that separate permitting process, and anything resulting from the master plan, again, will have to go through that NEPA process. And then we'll also have to meet any criteria established by the habitat conservation plan. And then again, I think I mentioned NEPA. So we know there's also some interest, and there's been some ongoing communications within the community and within the port looking at the Oyo Hotel. So as I showed on the kind of focus area of what the master plan is focusing on, we're not focused on that part of airport property. We're really focused on the aviation piece, but we are aware of that ongoing conversation, and that's being handled by the port outside of this airport master plan. So other things, so the operations forecast and kind of that overall aviation demand that I mentioned earlier. So if you didn't see public open house number 1, you can go back and see some of those forecast slides. But we're looking at a small annual increase of just over 0.5% per year over the next 20 years for base aircraft. So aircraft that are actually at the airport, likely in a hangar or out on the ramp. And then less than a 1% increase in overall airport operations. So we're not seeing significant trends of significant demand at the airport. Then the other thing is just wanted to remind everyone that the airport really plays an important role in the community. So as many of you know, we have the State Patrol, we have medevac on the airfield. You likely saw with the recent forest fires that there was fire support on the airport on the west side as well. So the airport really plays an important role, not only for the community, but also for the greater area. And then also just businesses. The airport supports businesses throughout the county as well. I think those were kind of the key questions and comments that had been brought up previously. I see there's at least one in the comments. So if you would like to use your raise your hand button, if you go to participants or under reactions, you'll see the raise your hand button. We are going to limit everyone to 3 minutes for your comment, and Jenny will switch over and show her screen with a timer for that. But then you're also welcome to type a comment in the chat box. You can also submit a comment at any point in time. The official project email address is ampupdate@portolympia.com. And that's also available on the Port's Airport Master Plan Update website as well. So you can submit a comment at any point throughout the study, even if you don't have a comment at this point.
Hey, Leah, before I share screen, do you want to also talk about the CAC?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. So we also know that we have the Habitat Conservation Plan, we have the Airport Master Plan, but there's also this state-funded study that's the Commercial Aviation Coordinating Committee, and hopefully I got that right, the CAC. And so that's, again, a study outside of the Airport Master Plan, and Olympia is not currently being considered as a part of that process. But the master plan is completely separate from that, and we're not focused on what the CAC is doing. Thank you for that reminder. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I can pull up the chat box here and see. So does anybody have their hand raised? I see any hands raised. So I did mention that just kind of the next steps in the alternatives is to look at the alternatives, develop an alternative evaluation criteria with the port, and then determine that preferred alternative. And when we have that preferred alternative, then we'll go through that environmental review. It's a very high level overview. It's not NEPA. So we look at a high level environmental overview, and then before any project can be developed at the airport, then that would go through that NEPA process.
I'm raising my hand. Do you see that?
I do. Ursula, go ahead.
I'm just wondering when there will actually be an open house. I know you call this an open house, but I call an open house a conversation, and looking at you guys and your presentation and then giving everyone 3 minutes, there's a real conversation that needs to happen in the community, and I don't see where this is really that platform. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, this is not this should be a conversation, but it's not.
Rudy, do you want to answer that or comment at all?
I don't have a specific answer to you right now. We hadn't, given the current constraints of the process that we're using, I didn't anticipate that there's going to be a change. So we can evaluate that further and perhaps address that later. But as of right now, this is the process that we're using.
Mhm. And I think it's important to understand that the airport master plan process is, we're really guided by the FAA. So that advisory circular, we really have to meet the aviation demand and look at the aviation demand that's being forecasted in that approved forecast by the FAA. And like Rudy said, it's like I previously said, it's an unconstrained.
That's a dirty word to me. Don't rub that in my face. You can do other things beyond the FAA. So a conversation in the community and really evaluating options. Why is there no option that the airport stays the same or even shrinks? It's in a prime location for residential building. Where is that being discussed?
Yeah, the purpose of this presentation today is not to debate that, and I can certainly reiterate what we said. This is an FAA process that follows the FAA structure, and that is not the discussion you're suggesting is not part of that process that the FAA provides.
But I'm part of the community and I would like to have that discussion, and I have the right to have that discussion with FAA or without FAA. The community is affected and the FAA is not affected. So where are you going to start having a conversation about real options with the community?
I don't have any further comments for you at this time. We're glad to move on to the next person.
I see Mr. Jorgensen has his hand up.
You're muted, Walt.
You're muted, Mr. Jorgensen.
Okay. Just a minute. Can you turn your sound? Excuse me, I had some sound in the background here from another computer. My name is Walt Jorgensen and I live in Tumwater, barely. And I just looking at my own image here and I see that there's appropriately a mistake on the lake in my background here. My question is, I guess, simple. I don't mean it to be naive, but my question is, how does any expansion, enlargement, whatever verb you want to use, of the airport, how is that going to benefit, first of all, me as a citizen taxpayer, and perhaps at the next level, the cities of, and it would be Tumwater and Olympia, it would be, of course, Thurston County. But how does it benefit us? And if you want to make reference to the economy, that's fine. But beyond that, on a day-to-day basis, how is this going to be better for me? There's lots of things that we're concerned about as far as I call costs in terms of, well, taxes and inconvenience, et cetera. But what I would like you to, if you can, and this can come later, and maybe in the process, at some point, a list of, and as specific as possible, what are the benefits that will accrue to me and my city as a result of expansion of airport activities? Thank you.
Yeah, Walt, thank you for your comment. And this is perhaps that's another opportunity for another discussion. The process today is to discuss the technical nature of where we are in the process in developing this in accordance with the FAA guidelines, as we've stated before. So I'm sure we can have an opportunity to answer your questions, specifically the ones you've asked, at another opportunity.
Okay.
Okay, I see Janet. Janet, if you want to unmute yourself.
Am I being heard now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you. I have several questions, actually. One is, what role can or will the public play in determining which of the alternatives that you showed will be chosen as the preferred alternative? My other question is related to the scope of what you're doing. I'm seeing planning on the airport property itself, but I'm wondering where the discussion happens about the impacts of airport development, increases of operation on the community. Things like, where will the aircraft be flying? Show us the flight paths. Where are the perimeters of the wildlife hazard protection zones? When is that happening, and will that be a part of this process? And then another question, I don't know if I should keep asking questions now or raise my hand again. Please let me know.
Well, and you can keep asking questions and we're going to note them. We're not going to answer them all today, and certainly those can be addressed at a later date. This was meant to be a public comment opportunity, and the ability to answer those questions that are applicable to the master plan is a little bit more detailed than our ability to do that in this forum. So,
How will you respond to the questions I just asked? Will that be in a written form on the port's website, or what manner of response will I receive?
I don't think we have an answer to that yet, but I can anticipate that a response to those in the airport master plan section on the website would be appropriate.
Another request actually I have is for those of us who've read previous master plans. There are huge volumes of them, as I'm sure you're aware, and I'm hoping that this master plan will be redlined so that we can see when we're reading what you produce, where the changes lie, as opposed to what was in the 2013 plan.
No, there will not be a red line. It's a completely different document and evaluating completely different circumstances that are being evaluated now than the previous master plan update.
Okay, in comp plans, like city comp plans, Thurston County comp plans, they are able to redline the changes. And I'm requesting that that be done.
And that will not be done.
Runway 826 used to be used as a noise mitigation runway. One of the alternatives involves decreasing the length of 826, which I assume means that it would be used less. So I'm wondering, as you shorten that, what will be the comparable noise mitigation plan offered?
So I will note, Janet, that at 826, the FAA does not deem that a necessary runway, and it's not eligible for federal funding at this time. The FAA has very strict criteria to determine when a crosswind runway, a second runway, is necessary and federally eligible, and it is not federally eligible based on our analysis and based on the analysis of the last airport master plan as well. And so because it's not federally eligible, we've looked at the uses that are taking place on that runway, and the type of aircraft that are utilizing that runway do not need the full length that it stands today. And so we're looking at a cost savings measure to be able to reduce that length. Thank you for your comments.
I do have one more question. Some of the projects that you outline are capacity enhancing, such as the parallel taxiway. The previous master plans have indicated that that would help the airport capacity increase to 230,000 aircraft annually. And there was a public health study done in SeaTac. I'm wondering if that study is going to be considered at all, mentioned, discussed during this master plan update process. It discusses impacts of aviation in general on a community of large airports. And the projections are that if this airport is fully developed and able to handle 230,000 aircraft per annually, that there would be significant public health impacts. I'm wondering if that study is going to play a part in determining which alternative here is chosen.
No, it will
will
not. And the forecast that the FAA has approved, while there may be the physical capacity for the layout to accept your number of 230 that you cite, 230,000 that you cited, that's not in the forecast for this airport.
So our approved forecast has just under 85,000 operations in our long-term 2040 forecast. Okay, I think I saw a few other hands up.
Yep, Lee Reiner. You want to unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for having this conversation today. As a member of the community that has lived in the area over 40 years, I have seen a lot of changes, of course, and I have close personal family that had a family home near the SeaTac airport in the late 40s, early 50s. And I saw the door open for expansion of the SeaTac. And of course, it went very much like we're going through right now. Oh, this is a forecast for only 2040. We don't know what's going to happen after that. The funding at this point is very limited and our scope is very limited and we don't know the answers and we're not going to have much public comment or public involvement because this is just the very, very beginning. And let's just put all of this on the back burner and it's hypothetical, but I have seen in my lifetime little teeny cracks open and then they get larger and larger and larger as what happened with SeaTac and the health of my dear family that they were right over the flight path of SeaTac deteriorated year after year. Everyone in the family had asthma. And as you know, right now, the SeaTac area is having problems, health problems as a community. But the bottom line is that all these forecasts and hypothetical views of what is going to happen, you don't want to talk about it. There isn't going to be much public discussion. At this point, you know, public comment is limited. But once we open the door, and once we let this ball get rolling, I'll probably be dead in the ground. Yeah, I understand that. But our generations of children are going to be under these emissions. And of course, we all hope for electric planes. How long do you think that's going to take to happen? Emissions from these planes coming over every so many minutes is awful. The noise is awful. The stress is awful. And you're opening the crack right now to allow this to go forward. And of course, the Port of Olympia has a history. And let's face it, many people have said this, of problems with the communication with the community, especially now with COVID, everything is shut down. We don't know when we're going to have in-person meetings again. So one, I have a lot of trouble with the port actually reaching out to the community and helping us go through this. And also, I have problems with the entire process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
See Charlotte Persons. You want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. One is I am concerned about how the HCP information is going to interact with your alternatives that you are proposing. It seems to me that HCP will be completed way after you have finished looking at these alternatives. My main concern is two. One is that it will increase amount of plane traffic potentially. And also it will increase the kinds and amount of development, commercial development around the airport. And all of that is going to affect the lives of the endangered species that we know live on the airport and in the surroundings, but mostly on those runways. So I'm concerned about how you're evaluating that, especially since the HCP is not completed, and when the public is going to be able to see how each of the three alternatives is going to be interrelating with that information. And when there is more information, the community can comment again before you choose your final alternative.
Well, I can address the piece. As we stated previously, the process that the FAA outlines is an unconstrained process, and the FAA master plan process is independent of the HCP process. The master plan is a conceptual planning document and process. And at the end of the day, the HCP will set the mitigation standards and requirements for any development that would have to actually move forward in terms of actual projects on the airport. So that's how those two are relate to each other. And as far as indicated previously, once we come from a technical perspective, which is where the primary focus is on the alternatives, then that will be brought back at another open house for public comment.
Okay.
That's all the hands that I see raised. I see
Jenny.
some of the
Jenny.
same. Yeah.
Jenny, Judy Barden is on Walter's computer and would like to comment.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. I'll reset.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for letting me comment. My name is Judy Barden, and I live in Olympia. And I have two houses that are presently rentals that are on Hoadley Street, so in Southeast Oley, and they are right in the flight path of the aircraft. And, you know, I lived in the house for 8 years, and the planes often fly fairly low, and they can be noisy. So I worry, and again, I'd like to echo some of Janet Witt's comments. You know, I would really like to see what is the flight path and the projected flight path for the aircraft. You know, I don't know if it's going to change, but as we move into the future. Also, is there, I think you said there was between 0.5% and 1% increase of flights per year. And I wondered if there was a range, you know, of the number of flights. And do we have, like, you know, what's the upper level, what's the lower level? And are there any confidence intervals in those estimates? Like, how certain are we for these estimates? The other thing is, I'd like to echo what a couple people have said, that I think we should really need to look at the health impacts and to include the study that was mentioned. And Olympia is in the process of densifying. The city has recently, with their housing options, I can speak for Olympia, allowed duplexes, triplexes, and fourplex in our single family neighborhoods. So it is, and there's new, you know, I don't know if you've been following the legislation in the legislature that didn't go through this year, is likely to be proposed next year, where they're trying to upzone, you know, many areas in, well, statewide. So with this increased in density, we're going to have more people exposed to aircraft. And so therefore, I think it's really important to study the health impacts.
Thank you.
Thanks. So if nobody else has their hand raised, I would like to share just the forecast slide again, Jenny.
Leah, I see Bob Jacobs is raising.
Oh,
his
okay.
hand now.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob. You want to unmute yourself?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? I'm
Yes.
Bob Jacobs. I am a resident of Olympia. I also own a property in Tumwater, very close to the airport and in the flight path. My big concern about this whole process is the incremental march toward really large enlargement of the airport. I know you said earlier that the CACC does not have Olympia on the list. I don't believe that. Well, I do believe that. But what I understand is that there is an option for the CACC process to have a last minute change and add airports. So I'm very concerned about that. I do not want expansion of Olympia as an alternative to SeaTac. I don't want a new airport in Thurston County as an expansion to accommodate SeaTac overflow. And I very strongly believe that whatever changes that you make in the plan that you're considering today should not in any way facilitate such an expansion. And I know these can be very subtle changes, those little taxiways parallel to the runways and all of that. That's a possible facilitation of expansion. And I really think if we're in any possible chance of heading that way, we need to poll our community. We could do a vote, put it on the ballot countywide, ask the people what they want. I think you'll find that overwhelmingly, the public does not want a SeaTac overflow airport in Thurston County. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I see one more hand up, Jenny.
Yes, Tom.
Hey, as I'm looking through these documents, just for context, can you share with me, as the regional master plan gets updated every 10 years, what does it build on the previous master plan, or does it kind of start from scratch and start all over again to determine a complete basis point, or is it kind of an ongoing document, like a living document, just to update with the times and the regulations that are present today?
So this master plan is an update to the last master plan. So we aren't starting from scratch. When we look at, for example, an aviation forecast, we follow the FAA's aviation forecasting process. But we start with whatever baseline data, existing historic operations. We look at what the last master plan forecast had. We look at the terminal area forecast from the FAA as well. But a lot of the inventory data, obviously the facilities are there. They were there in the last master plan. We just updated and added any new facility information, any change in condition. And then same thing, we're starting, as we showed earlier, from that existing airport layout plan and just simply looking at, like you said, what standards have changed. Taxiway standards have changed with the FAA. And so where are we non-compliant today if we were to go out and redevelop a taxiway or have to do pavement maintenance on a taxiway? So we're looking at those intersections, the spacing on the taxiways for those design standards. So it's not reinventing the wheel. We're building on what happened last time. But as you said, kind of that living document, it's not necessarily a living document that gets updated every year. It's just being updated at this point in time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. See another hand up.
Carla. Carla, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now? I'm sorry. Took
Yes,
me a minute
ma'am.
there. Okay, sorry. Yes, my name is Carla Wolfsberg. I live in Tumwater. And I just want to underscore what Mr. Bob Jacobs just said about asking the public, because I was reading on the website, the Airport Master Plan update under Public Involvement Plan. And it talks about the spectrum of the public participation. And I am very sure that what I am reading is exactly what Mr. Jacobs was just talking about. It says that basically the master plan will place the final decision-making in the hands of the public. So I would like to see also that the public, not just a few people, are able to join you on the website here or at another open house or send you an email, but something that's very broad that impacts all the people of Thurston County. And I would like to see that happen. I think that's appropriate. I think we all need to know what people feel in this community about such an expansion. It does really impact us all. Even just yesterday, I heard a very small plane way, way up in the sky that just completely, the sound of it just completely filled the space. And I can imagine what that might be with jets or other aircraft flying in and out on a much more frequent basis. So I would like to see some sort of public poll take place definitely in the near future and let people tell you what they think about this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Sue in the chat box was having a hard time finding the raise your hand button, so maybe we can call on her next.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I agree with most of the comments. I wonder why you have 3 alternatives. I don't understand what's the basis of all the alternatives. You must have ideas of the number of planes. It just says we need these facilities, but what's the why? What's behind? We need this one, or this one. Is that displayed somewhere in your work? Do you understand?
So we have several different alternatives simply because we're trying to look at different options. So there could be multiple options to meet the FAA's design standards for a taxiway. There could be multiple locations where a taxiway could go. And so we look at various options. We're looking at the option that the last master plan proposed. We're looking that the existing airport layout plan has approved, and we're looking at other alternatives. Is there a more efficient way to have that taxiway, and because taxiway standards have changed since the last master plan. So we look at different alternatives. We don't just go in and say, we know this is the right answer. We want to look and evaluate, does it make sense to have general aviation, smaller aircraft here and larger aircraft over here, or does it make sense to put them over there? So that's why we look at several different alternatives. I did want,
are you interrupting my time? Because I have a follow-up question.
Sure, go ahead.
So I get more time, right? Since you took a minute.
Go ahead, ma'am.
So when you have parallel runways, there must be that has to do with, this can take this much commercial, more commercial. You divided it into commercial aviation. So can you somewhere say this kind of alternative A will be this much, could handle this much commercial air, this much commercial in general? And then the follow-up question is, can you put a cap in this plan? Can you say, we've decided not to have any more than this number. This is the cap. There, and then you would have a limited number. I also worry about, changing topics, about wildlife, the health of wildlife, your pathways go over our conservation areas, Miller Sylvania Park. A lot of endangered species are out there. Frogs are out there, and leaded fuels will go through the skins of frogs. And you could, so you're going to develop HCPs outside of the airport, and your HCPs have to be within Tumwater. You didn't note who your teammate in the HCP is. I assume it's Tumwater, but they have to answer your development at the airport within, I assume, Tumwater. Well, then that's the Tumwater is trying to save the frog. So I think there is some connection between what goes on outside the airport by your decisions inside the airport. And I would prefer that those concerns aren't dismissed. So can you put a cap? We will not do any more than this amount. Also, I would like a distinction stated between cargo airport, cargo delivery. Do electric planes carry cargo? Or if we become a cargo airport, will we not have electric planes? That is another question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to just clarify for the group that all three of the alternatives, they don't impact the size or type of aircraft that we're expecting to fly in and out of Olympia. We don't expect a significant change based on our aviation forecast in the size and type of aircraft that are already serving the airport. The aircraft that are already serving the airport will continue to serve the airport. But most of the alternatives, again, they're all focused on those FAA design standards for safety. And just to meet those design criteria from the FAA. So that's why we have variances in the different alternatives. None of the alternatives have like alternative 1 doesn't allow X aircraft to come in and alternative 2 only allows Y aircraft to come in. The runways are predominantly staying the same. The type of aircraft that we're forecasting to come in and out of the airport are not expected to change in the future.
Well, as a follow-up of that, would you say we will not entertain, sign a statement that we will not entertain any CAC requests to expand our airport?
That I can answer that question. That is not within our ability to do. And there's grant assurances, there's deed restrictions, there are a whole number of things, and that is a significantly detailed discussion, but the answer is no.
Would you put a percentage? There is a X amount of percentage that will expand?
No.
So really your statement is empty?
No, I'm just answering your question the best I can.
Well,
Are there anyone else that hasn't spoken yet that would like to comment? I didn't see any other hands raised.
If nobody else is raising their hand, I would like to reiterate, this is Ursula Euler one more time, that the health studies from Tufts University and from the Department of Health of King County be included as reference material and a point of reference into the master plan, and that the correct decision criteria that you presented on December 16th on slide 24, I believe, there are certain decision criteria for the options that include a new category that is called public health. Those studies have shown that public health is affected around commercial airline service in a circumference of up to 10 miles of commercial aviation activity. So we really need to start taking that into account. It is linking cause of pollution to health problems that needs to continue, that needs to be introduced into the decision making. I also would like to see more options, an option of no expansion, an option of what a contraction would look like. I can request, Rudy can say he won't do it. I mean, that's on him, but I can request that as a member of the public and an informed member and observer, not member, but observer of the CAC.
Thank you for your request. And I will also reiterate what Leah said. Our process is not related to the CAC. It is completely independent, and thank you.
I would also like to make an additional comment.
And I am making the request, though. You understand that?
Yes,
You
I
do
understand.
not
I
get-
understand
you do
your
not get
request. Thank
this
you.
My request.
I understand your request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph mentioned grant obligations. I would like to see on the port's website in lay terms explaining exactly what those obligations are. My understanding is that the grant obligations last for a period of 20 years. And I would also like to see a list of the grants that have been accepted by the port over the last 20 years, with the amount of each grant and what each obligation of each grant agreement that the port has entered into, what that amount is. I'd appreciate that. And thank you for this opportunity to give comments.
Yeah, and I will respond to that if you that the information you're requesting, if you'll submit a public records request through the port's website, then we can put that in our process and provide that information. You can get that information just as quickly in terms of the FAA grant assurances by Googling FAA sponsor assurances, and it'll come right up on the FAA's website, and you could read those, this afternoon if you wanted to.
Thank you. It would be good to see that also on the port's website with the update information, being that website mentions grant assurances. Thank you for that information.
Thanks.
I might also add that there is also, if you search FAA grants, you can also go on the FAA.gov website and search all grants. You can search by airport and it'll give you a full grant history of what the grant was for and how much the grant was for. So all of that is publicly available on the FAA's website.
I'll make a note that we can attach a link to that on our airport webpage as well.
I can provide this to you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Okay, Leah, I think we are good. I'm going to stop sharing and go ahead and give back to you.
Okay, I think we're good. Again, if anyone else has any comments, you can submit those to ampupdate@portolympia.com. That's also available on the Airport Master Plan Update website also. So there is other documents. There's the notes and videos from other meetings that we've held as well as the public involvement plan that was previously mentioned, that talks about the IEP2 spectrum and that we're in the informed portion of that spectrum when it comes to the inform and the consult, not in the involve, collaborate, or empower section of the spectrum. It looks like Mr. Newman might have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I was reviewing, so it says extend runway 17 in the future plan. It looks like if you extend runway, it'll take out Capitol Way. Can you comment on that? Thanks.
So this airport master plan update is not looking at a runway extension. The only runway change that we're looking at is actually reducing the crosswind runway's length. So no runway extension is being proposed as it was in the last airport master plan. Thank you. Do we have any other last minute questions? Thank you all for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Again, this information will be posted on the airport master plan update page as well. And then we'll also make sure that there's a PDF of the 3 different alternatives on there as well so that they're easy to find. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.